And we are live. Good evening. Hi, this is Steve Sebedaski, publisher of Bayoubuzz.com. Now, tonight we have, I think, a really good conversation going on. We have Lamar White Jr., a blogger from Senator Lamar. He's also a law school student and a popular Louisiana blogger. I will say liberal blogger because, you know, Lamar, that's what you say that you are. Am I correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and we also have Jim Brown. Just in terms of background, Jim not only joins me on these hangouts for Bayoubuzz.com, but Jim actually is a former state elected official, state senator, and also commissioner of insurance, secretary of state. And Jim has a radio talk show that's nationally recognized, nationally subscribed, and his website is what, Jim Brown.
JimBrownLA.com.
LA.com. And you also have one JimBrownUS.com.
USA.com. I'm around for the rest of the country. I'll go to the same site, Steve.
Okay, good. Now, the focus tonight, of course, is dealing with Lamar White, and the really, I think, sensational blogs that he has posted in, I think, particularly in the last month. He wrote, I think, one of the very best pieces. I'm jealous because, you know, he wrote, I think, a really terrific piece about Bobby Jindal. And a lot of people really picked up on that and recognized his writing abilities. He wrote one more recently, and a couple recently, dealing with another Republican politician, elected official, and that, of course, is Steve Scalise. But before we get into it, Lamar, why don't you give us some background, if you don't mind? Tell us about who you are. You're a law school student in Texas. How'd you get involved in the blogging? How'd you get involved in that? And just give some background information, please.
Sure. Well, and thanks for having me.
Sure.
I was born and raised in Alexandria. Went to Rice University in Houston and returned to Alexandria after college and worked for Mayor Jacques Roy in Alexandria for 5 years before deciding to go to law school. Here in Dallas, I'm at Southern Methodist University Dedman School of Law in Dallas. I've been running my website for about 9 years. It'll be 9 years this March. At first, I've covered mainly local Alexandria politics. So, of course, the audience was a little limited. The longer I stayed back in Louisiana, the more I expanded to write about Louisiana politics. I was the official state blogger for the Democratic National Convention in 2008 and been writing about national and Louisiana politics almost exclusively since then. And I've maintained my website since going to law school.
And that's kind of hard to do, right?
Well, it's a little challenging, but I've managed to keep it up.
Okay, now right now you're in did you say?
My final year. Yeah, this is my final semester. It starts tomorrow.
I'll be darned. So is it law school books now, or is it a combination of law school and continuing some of the stories that you wrote? You also wrote a story, let me just mention this, that during the election, you and another blogger out of New Orleans, right. Jason Berry,
right.
And y'all wrote a story on about Bill Cassidy and I guess his some say double billing and some say just 2 jobs, and that got a tremendous amount of I guess controversy, but also a lot of people talking around the state and around the country. Jim, I'm sure you have some questions. Go ahead, please.
For Lamar, you mean?
Well, whatever. You have a comment? You have a question?
I'd say this.
Yeah.
I think that what's interesting about this whole Scalise story is that there are a number of levels that usually when there's a story out, it involves, you take the Bill Cassidy story, did he overbill, and that still is being investigated, but it was kind of a one-factor story. It didn't have multiple levels. what I find fascinating about this whole Scalise story is that it certainly is a factor in people reviewing his job in the district itself, in the congressional district itself. Did we make a mistake on this guy, or do we agree with this guy?
Okay, let me interrupt for a second, and let's just, for those people who don't know, let's talk about what facts are out there, at least from right now, from the standpoint of the blogger, and then I'm going to throw out some facts that I hear from the other side. So I don't mean to interrupt you, but if you want to start talking about the actual facts first, and then we'll talk about the different levels, and I totally agree with you. So Jim, go ahead and start that, and then please fill in.
I might take this perspective. I might really throw it to Lamar to give the facts. I guess the question, you get into the nuances that are several things. First of all, is this district unique? And you have David Duke, who's so tied to the Ku Klux Klan, the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, and coming out of that district. And then Scalise apparently saying to Stephanie Grace, who writes for the Picayune, I'm David Duke without the baggage. And so that whole scenario on that local level, is that upending Scalise's comments that, you just make speeches to anybody and everybody. I can kind of identify with the anybody and everybody discussion if he didn't do other things, because having run, I think, 8 times statewide, I didn't turn down any group and I didn't really vet the group. If someone said come speak, if I could do 4 or 5 speeches in a day and run them all in, I would do that. And I never really vetted who I spoke to, never had a confrontation over who the group was, or should I have spoken to that group or not. So that in itself, to me, wasn't a big deal, except that apparently the congressman has said some things that bring up the Duke factor when he says, I'm just like David Duke, except the baggage. I guess the baggage he's referring to is the Ku Klux Klan tie. That opens up a little different dimensions. So that's why I said you got these different dimensions. If he just spoke to some group, didn't know who they were, well, I've done that on 1,000 different occasions in my 28 years in political life. So I can kind of sympathize with someone that got into a pickle over some group they spoke to 10 or 12 years ago, because they've done the same thing. Does it rise to a different level by what he said or what Lamar has dug out? And so I think I might kick it to Lamar there, Steve, to see, does it go further than that? Lamar, I'd probably, like you, Steve, play the devil's advocate. If he really just accepted a speech to a group and talked about the Skelly plan or whatever it happened to be, I don't think you taint his whole career over something like that. Maybe he should have learned from it, did the vetting. But there's been some other layers that are starting to come out, and maybe you might have had a role in those coming out, Lamar, that may put a different taint on it. You see what I'm saying? I'd be a little defensive of saying, hey, so he spoke to some group that had some extreme right-wing ties. I've spoken to groups that have had some extreme left-wing ties and right-wing ties. But you, I think, are going to take it a little further. So I'd like to throw it to you to see, does it go beyond just giving a speech to someone who's a constituent of his? And one quick caveat, I remember specifically when I ran for office for the Senate, that fellow I was tied to had some associations with the Klan, and I beat the guy real handily. And 4 or 5 of his elements wanted to have coffee with me. This is 1971. They wanted to have coffee with me in Winsboro, Louisiana. Well, I knew that there was some ties to past Klan activities. I had coffee with them. What are you talking about? I was trying to lower the whole rhetoric in an area where race relationships were very tight and difficult. So, does that taint me for the next 32 years of my public career? So I'm going to throw it to you, Lamar, to take it to a level that maybe I'm not fully appreciating or you've delved into.
Sure, and thanks. I guess I kind of want to go over the